Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our fall Preceptor Development Seminar for today. Thank you all for joining. I'm excited for the topic for today regarding addressing the elephant in the room, embracing our diversity in the pharmacy workplace. Before we get started, it's my pleasure to introduce our fantastic speakers for today. The first one is Dr. Ifeanyi Egbunike-Chukwuma. She is currently the director of pharmacy services with over 30 years of experience in several clinical and ambulatory care pharmacy practices. She has developed advanced pharmacy practice by implementing pharmacy programs that improve patient care. She chairs and serves on multiple health systems committees and pharmacy organizations. In addition, she serves on the Diversity and Inclusion Council and serves as a co-chair for the Inclusive Environment Work Group, vice chair Embraced, People of Color Employee Resource Group. We are also fortunate to have her as a co-chair for the MSHP DEI Steering Committee, and she serves as a member of the ASHP section of Pharmacy Educators. She's also a mother of 5 children, wife and Catholic, and co-founder of an NGO focused on women and the girl child and on improving health and well-being of citizens of her hometown in Nigeria. The other speaker that I would like to introduce is Dr. Nephthalee Edmond Tefera. She is a board certified specialty pharmacist and certified leadership and life coach. She completed her pharmacy training at Notre Dame of Maryland University School of Pharmacy and completed a PGY1 residency at the Veterans Affairs Medical Center in Hampton, Virginia. She is currently a pharmacy operations supervisor at MedStar Montgomery Medical Center, a not-for-profit healthcare organization in Olney, Maryland. In this position, Nephthalee has become an expert in operational workflow processes, clinical support services, and team development and leadership coaching. She maintains an active role with the American Pharmacists Association, International Coaching Federation, and the Maryland Society of Health System Pharmacists. She enjoys serving as the MSHP co-chair of the DEI committee and as an adjunct professor for the University of Maryland College of Pharmacy and Notre Dame of Maryland School of Pharmacy. In her spare time, she enjoys spending time with her husband and 2 girls, traveling and trying new restaurants in the DMV area. With that, I'll be turning it over to them. Just a reminder that you'll be able to show that you'll be able to put anything in the chat function if you have any questions throughout the thing. We'll make sure to have time at the end for any questions. Thank you. With that, I'll turn it over to the tip. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sandeep, for that warm welcome and the nice introductions. It's a pleasure for us to be here with you all today. Our topic and discussion for this afternoon, again, the title is Addressing the Elephant in the Room, Embracing Our Diversity in the Pharmacy Workplace. Ify and I have the pleasure to present on this topic.
All right. So my name is Ify Egbunike, and I'm the Director of Pharmacy, as been said. Next slide.
All right, I wanted to start with this slide. What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. We understand this topic can be controversial. It can leave some feeling uncomfortable, and in worst cases, some feeling attacked. That is not our intent for this presentation. We do understand that although this might be a really popular and heavy topic, our hope today is to establish a space that allows for a dialogue, discussion, and perhaps just a different consideration of thought as it relates to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So with that said, anything discussed here stays here, and feel free to bring your authentic selves in this discussion.
So we want to start today by getting to know our audience. So it's very interactive. We want you to start typing for us if you can. We want you to go ahead and tell us what religion you subscribe to. Let's start with that. I will put this in presentation mode. Can we get, you can type it in. I see Baptist. Awesome. Christian.
You could just hit
Catholic.
from the current slide there. You should be able to go to the presentation mode if that's what you want to do.
Yes, where? From.
Yeah, right
okay.
there. That's good. Yeah.
All right.
And then if you hit the display settings at the top, right there, yeah. And then you just have swap it presenter and slideshow.
Awesome.
There you go. There you go. Thanks.
Okay. So Episcopal, Christian, Seventh-day Adventist. Awesome. So we have quite a diverse group as it relates to religion. So let's find out what is your racial ethnic identity. And there's a reason why we did not tell anybody what that is. We want you to go ahead and self-describe. Middle Eastern, Chinese, Asian, Taiwanese, awesome, African, Caribbean, Indian, African American, Pakistani, awesome. Indian, African American, Caribbean, English, Irish, French, and German. Love that. Awesome. Romanian, Canadian, and Bangladeshi. Fantastic. As we're tapping there, just keep going. We want you to tell us what generation group do you belong to? Gen X, if we're born in 1996 to 2015, boomer, we got a boomer. And Gen Y, more boomers. Gen Y, millennial, Gen X, more Gen Ys. Gen Y, excellent. Baby boomers, millennials. I noticed we don't have any traditionalists, but so far we're doing great with millennial, Gen X, Gen Y. I don't know if I saw a Gen Z, but why diverse? At least pretty good diversity there. So at this time, could you rate for us how comfortable you are talking about racial, cultural, and social issues on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being very uncomfortable and 10 being very comfortable? Let's see that. I see a 9, 8, 10, 8, 7, 6, 6, 5, 6, 5, 5, 5. My mathematical skills are working. It's looking more like around 6, 7, right? Yeah, and that's pretty good, because I think the last time we did this, we're leaning towards more like 5. Okay, so thank you all for that. Thank you for supporting us that way, for giving us a brief idea of who we have in the audience.
Yes, thank you for sharing that. So with that said, we have nothing to disclose. We have no conflicts of interest. Again, we are here to create a dialogue. Our learning objectives include defining diversity, equity, inclusion, which we'll refer to as DEI, recognizing common barriers to DEI in the pharmacy work and teaching settings, identifying tools for preceptors to create a more inclusive and equitable learning environment, describing strategies for inclusive teaching, scholarship, and professional development using ASHP's task force recommendations, and lastly, explaining the difference between gender identity and biological sex and the practical use of pronouns.
I am technically trying to get this. Okay.
Awesome. Some other definitions. DEI, which notates diversity, equity, and inclusion. LGBTQIA, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, intersect, and asexual. BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, people of color. ASHP, which we should all be familiar with, American Society of Health System Pharmacists. And HBCU, historically Black colleges and universities. All right, so what brought us all here today? We're here to increase our skills, our awareness, and how we show up as better preceptors. So some of the characteristics that come to mind when I think of effective preceptors include being organized and focused, valuing preceptor-learner interactions, being dynamic and enthusiastic, relating well to learners, using an analytical approach, being competent and confident, and modeling professional behavior. And specifically as it relates to DEI, the characteristics that are underlined lend, in our opinion, lend to a better fostering of an environment that includes diversity, equity, inclusion. So valuing our interactions with our learners, relating well to them, and of course, modeling professional behavior.
So at this time, let's try to do some knowledge assessments. So we'll start with this. For which of the following statements is or are true about diversity, equity, and inclusion? Diversity is the presence of characteristics that make individuals or groups different from each other, such as race, gender, religion, sexual orientation, age, ethnicity, social economic status, language, disability. Or is equity is promoting justice, impartiality, and fairness within the procedures and distribution of resources by an institution or system. Inclusion is ensuring that you have equal representation of all groups in your team. Is A, B, or C correct? Or is A and B correct? Or is A, B, and C correct? Go ahead and type in there. See what a few D's. All right, very good. So let's move into some definition. So we have going to look at diversity, equity, and inclusion, and we added allyship. And the reason why we did this is because we feel strongly that without allyship, it is difficult to have a diverse, equitable, and inclusive environment. So diversity is the presence of differences that may include race, gender, religion, sexual orientation, age, ethnicity, social economic status, language, and disability. There's so many layers of diversity. First, you start internally, with personality. You're thinking about things, different things like your internal dimensions, like your age, your race, gender, sexual orientation, ethnicity. Then you have things like marital status and income and personal habits and religion and educational background. Then there's other things as well in the organizational dimension that has to do with seniority at work, whether you're a union affiliate, where you work at, what type of work that you do. So there's so much diversity. I really feel strongly, and we both of us feel strongly, that when we talk about diversity, we should not be talking about just race. There's so much involved in this process, and we need to all know all of the things that impact us. Equity is promoting justice, impartiality, and fairness within the procedures and distribution of resources by an institution or system. Equity is not equality. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. Equity is that you have justice for everyone, and you're completely impartial and you're fair. And I said, educators, we need to really provide equity in the way that we look at our students and the way that we teach our students. And we give you some examples of that. Inclusion is ensuring that members of a diverse group actually feel and are welcome. It's one thing to have a diverse environment. It's one thing to say that we have all genders, all races, all sexual orientation, all religions, but does everybody feel that their voices are heard? Do they feel welcome when they are with each other? So that's what inclusion is all about. Allyship is any person that actively promotes and aspires to advance the culture of inclusion through intentional, positive, conscious efforts that benefit people as a whole. So one of the ways that I look at this allyship is if you walk into a room, if you're a male and you walk into a room for a meeting and every single person in the room is male, right? And the first thing that you need to be thinking about is where are the females, right? And the next thing that you need to do is actively start working on the fact that you need to have more females in that conference room the next time that you work. Then you need to put actions in place to assure that you're going to have more females in the room. That's allyship. You are speaking for the ones that are not actually on the table and that are not in the room. So this is one of my most favorite cartoons. And I'm sure everybody has seen this. If you haven't, very happy. This will be the first time that you see it. So let me just walk you through this cartoon and illustrates everything we need to know about diversity and inclusion and equity and equality. So let's start with reality. See, there's always the people that have, they usually have more and they will stand up more and they can see way over this fence, right? You see this little guy here? Luckily, somebody did give him something to stand on so that they can see over the fence. But there's another guy here on the purple shirt. He's actually inside a hole. So the work that they have to do is they have to climb right out of the hole, right? Before they can even think of somebody giving them a stool to stand on. So when you think about this hole here, think more of structural impediments that they have, that inequalities that they have that are just making it impossible for them to even dig themselves out of that hole. Equality is when you give everybody the same amount of resources to stand up so they can see over that particular fence. But you see, everybody got the same number. The people that already have in them the physical structures to be able to see over the fence, they're doing fine. This little guy got a little help and they're able to do well. And this person, they just still got the same amount of help, still cannot see over the fence. Equity is when you give people exactly what they need. You give them the resources that they need according to the needs that they have, so they can see over the fence. But where we are really trying to reach to is the liberation phase, where you remove the fence. And what you need to know is that the fence is all of the different barriers that we place in front of people that make them that will make them unable to see through and to perform to the best of their ability. So once you remove the barriers, then people can now perform to the best of their ability. That is why it is important that until we get to liberation, we must get to equity. We must get to that justice that we want. So let's remember that assessment. I think everybody got this right. We're not going to read the question for you again because the answer is all of the above. Just for the interest of time, everybody got D right from what I can see in the chat. So the next thing that we want to talk about is segue into what is happening in ASHP as it relates to diversity and equity and inclusion. And we chose ASHP mostly because of the fact that they did have this task force on racial diversity, equity, and inclusion. So which of the following strategies are recommended to residency programs, hospitals, and health systems by ASHP Task Force on Racial Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion? A, include topic discussions with students on health disparities and social determinants of health, including race and socioeconomic status. B, provide continuous professional development and training to leaders and staff on diversity, equity, and inclusion. C, partner with HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities, and institutions with high enrollment of people, of Black, Indigenous, people of color students, to expose Black students to pharmacy practice. D, increase the number of BIPOC applicants, reduce biases in screening tools, and collect data on demographics of applicants and positions granted in hospitals and health systems. Is it A, B, C, or D, or is it all of the above? Go ahead and let us know what you think. We will go through the answer. I know it feels like being in the classroom today. Still looking at the chat to see if anybody had an answer. I see 1 E and 2 E's. So, all right, I got some response, that's good. So if you have not seen this, this is ASHP's Task Force on Racial Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion report. It came out in January 2021. It is not a big document, but it's worth reading. And it does give you an insight. Very briefly, what ASHP did was to look at every aspect of ASHP: governance and committees, education and training, research, advocacy, publication, marketing and communications. And they're looking at how can they increase diversity and inclusion in every aspect. And then they put up some recommendations on how that could be done. So let's look at what they said about residencies and then what they said about health systems, and they're very similar. For residency programs, they want them to include ongoing education and training to reduce implicit bias. And we're going to talk about implicit bias and different types of biases in a few minutes. To encourage racial diversity and foster a more inclusive environment. So their first point is that you need to reduce bias so that you can have a more inclusive environment for the trainers. Encourage increasing the number of BIPOC applicants. So this really speaks to where is your source of residents? Where are they coming from? How are you screening? How are you identifying who to market your residency program to? And are you actively seeking out a broad range of schools or pharmacy to make sure that they are aware of your residencies? Are you going to them, to the areas where you know that you're going to have a more diverse group, or are you targeting certain groups of individuals, certain schools? We actually heard that there were some residencies that will offer bonuses for students that come out of a particular school, right? So what does that say about the rest of the schools? That is just an exercise that shows you that this is not going to be an inclusive residency program, because you're targeting a particular group of people and you're incentivizing a particular group of people. You continue demographic data collection to understand specific disparities between applicants and positions granted. This requires that you continue to talk to your graduates after graduation from your residency, right? To find out specifically what the impact of the residency program was. So I will say this, about 20 years ago when I was on faculty, one of the things that we did was to try to find out where we were not getting enough applicants from some of our high schools in the neighborhoods. And one of the things that you did was you targeted your program to them. We met with their different schools, we talked to them, and we make sure that they are actually producing people that will be able to be successful applicants to the School of Pharmacy. In addition to that, once we get the students in, we follow them, for a few years to find and ask them questions about their treatment, ask them questions about the program and what they learn and how it applied to their current jobs. So it's just one example. I know a lot of us are doing that in academia, and this is going to be something that we need to be targeting for our residency programs. Don't let your residents go. You need to find them and find out how diverse. After they graduated, is probably a good time to ask how diverse and how inclusive your program is. Not while they're in the program, because people are not going to be that honest with you when you are holding their grade and their graduation hostage for them. Okay, so for hospitals and health systems, require practitioners and residents to actively participate in training of BIPOC learners. First, you have to find the learners, and then we're going to now have to be part of the training of those learners that are BIPOC. Include topic discussions with all learners on health disparities and social determinants of health. Include race and social economic status. I have to say that if you haven't heard or if you don't know about the impact of social determinants of health on the outcomes of health of our population, then it's something that we really need to learn. We need to focus on that, because we're finding that more than 90% of the clinical outcomes we expect are all determined by social determinants. So we can do all the work we can. We can teach people about their medication. We can train them. We can educate them. We can make sure they have all that knowledge and all of that understanding about their disease states. But what is really impacting them is the fact that they don't have really good healthy food. They don't have access to a pharmacy. They're living in the food and pharmacy desert. There are so many that don't have transportation to come to their appointments. They don't have walking paths in their neighborhood to exercise. So there's all kinds of things that can potentially impact our patients that are not about the clinical care that we provided for them. We need to provide continuous professional development and training to leaders and staff on diversity, equity, and inclusion. We're doing that now, but this is really a tip of the iceberg. People need to understand unconscious biases, cultural awareness, humility training, and other relevant topics in that area. And again, ASHP has really great free programs that are running right now that you can go to. And they also have a certification program. Then they want hospitals and health systems to partner with HBCUs and institutions with a high enrollment of BIPOC learners to expose Black learners to pharmacy practice. If you're not already, I came to Maryland, and when I came here, I'll say that University of Maryland does have a good diversity from what I've seen in terms of their student body, because I've seen all races, all genders, all types of people in my rotation, so I can say that. But what I know is that even my institution has not reached out to historical Black colleges and universities to see if they can send their students over here. This is something that we're actively working on. But in the nursing end, we're doing a pretty good job of partnering with those schools. All right, so as it relates to the assessment, we feel that this is all of the above, all of the things that we read out from ASHP. ASHP does want you to have topic discussions on health disparities and social determinants. They want you to provide professional development and training, and they want you to partner with HBCUs and increase the number of BIPOC students. So it's all of the above. Neph?
Awesome. So another knowledge assessment question to segue into the next topic. Preceptors can create a more equitable and inclusive learning environment by A, increasing their knowledge of DEI initiatives within their organization, creating a respectful environment and safe space for people of color, LGBTQIA community, and people with disabilities. C, recognizing and addressing their personal biases, as well as microaggressions, micro-insults, and micro-invalidations. D, A and B are correct. And lastly, E, A, B, and C are correct. So we will see where that leads us. Yep, and I'm seeing a lot of E's. So how does this all apply to pharmacy? Pharmacists have the privilege and platform to work individually and collectively with other organizations to build competent systems that reduce healthcare disparities. How? We have the ability to increase awareness of the disparities. We can promote effective communication with patients and providers. We have the ability to promote diverse and culturally competent workforces and environments. We can collect and report data on healthcare access, utilization, and outcomes. And we also can research, identify, and disseminate best practices for culturally competent care. Also, with all of this in mind, there's a lot to consider. As Ify nicely described, the internal, the external, and organization layers related to this movement, DEI. But ultimately, it starts with you. And that looks like educating yourself on DEI, recognizing and addressing your own biases, being familiar with what implicit bias is, recognizing and addressing microaggressions, micro-insults, micro-invalidations, being aware of terms that relate to racial identity, cultural identity, and gender identity. They are all different. And primarily focusing on the big picture. As preceptors, our goal here is to create a respectful space and a safe space that's conducive to learning and development. So some of the features of bias. We'll start with assumption of superiority. And what's happening here is one is believing I am better than you. Assumption of correctness. This is the way it should be because this is the way it's always been done. Assumption of universality. We are all the same. Everybody is just like me. Similar to me effect, where we perceive others similar to ourselves more positively than others. Social status effect, perceiving people with high social status more positively than lower status. And salience effect, focusing attention on individuals who are conspicuously different. And this is what we see a lot in retail settings, teaching settings. This is a common concern that comes up in these efforts. Implicit bias, what is it? One, it's unconscious, it's automatic. It's based on stereotypes that potentially could have occurred from our backgrounds, where we grew up, where we went to school. We all have it, even those who are affected by it. Generally, it's not an indication of our beliefs or values. You can have someone who believes fundamentally that everyone should have access to good education, fair education. But when it comes to the screening tools for for instance, a residency program, the screening tools don't really eliminate bias. And that's where we see a lot of this coming into play in the learning environment. How does implicit bias affect our decisions? They usually affect decisions that are ambiguous. For instance, topics such as what is respect? That can be ambiguous, what one would describe as being respectful. So this is where we see implicit bias show up. And it's mostly in decisions that are not clearly defined. I found this quote, and I believe that it really spoke to what implicit bias really is. It is activated involuntarily without awareness or intentional control. It can be either positive or negative. Everyone is susceptible to it. Having biases don't make you a bad person. It only makes you human. So again, reiterating that the intention of this discussion today is not to attack anyone. It's not to charge anyone with any crime, but it's more so to bring a level of awareness to our biases and how we make decisions and how this all plays a role in our teaching setting. So microaggressions, what are they? It is an everyday verbal, nonverbal, environmental slight, snub, or insult. It may be intentional or unintentional that communicates hostile, derogatory, or negative messages to target persons based solely upon their marginalized group. So micro insults, this is unconscious, sometimes very unintentional. They're subtle, they're acts that convey contempt and disrespect for someone. We'll get more into that with some of the examples of microaggressions. Micro assaults, this is overt, this is conscious, this is explicit. They're sometimes racial derogation characterized by a verbal or nonverbal attack meant to hurt the victim. These are the cases where one walks into the bathroom and there's a slur written on the wall. We can go back to the times of 9/11 and some of the micro assaults that resulted from 9/11 towards groups that practice the Islamic faith. So some examples of microaggression. Ascription of intelligence. Common comments include, you are a credit to your race. I would have never guessed you were a scientist. What's happening here? People of color, generally who are not white, are not considered as intelligent. We've often seen this too, where, for instance, we say perhaps to an Asian person, you must be good at math. Can you help me with this problem? This assumption that all Asians are intelligent and good at math and science. So the message here is that your race dictates your intelligence. Color blindness. This is very popular, and this is oftentimes where we see that innocent comment that doesn't really land well. When I look at you, I don't see color. There is only one race, the human race. Although, it's easy to think that this is more of a comment to promote unity. What's really happening here, you're denying the experience of your student, or of your learner. You're indirectly asking them to assimilate to their dominant culture. You're denying the significance of their experience. Alien in one's own land. Again, this is very common, and many times it doesn't come across as insulting, but it can leave one feeling like an alien in their own land. What are you? You're so interesting looking. You speak very good English. Wow, that's shocking. What's happening here is you're not a true American. That's the message that's being communicated. You're a perpetual foreigner in your own country. Your ethnic identity or racial identity makes you exotic. Traditional gender role stereotyping. For instance, you're a girl. You don't have to be good at math. Or asking a woman if she is planning on having children in an inappropriate time. So another example also seen where you might be labeling someone based on their gender without having that conversation. So here we're saying the message is that women are less capable in math or science. That's why we're shocked, or you don't need to be good at it. Asking a woman if she's looking to have children, we're dictating that women should be married at a certain age, and during childbearing ages that they should be looking to have children. That is their primary purpose. Again, these are all based at times on innocent assumptions, but nevertheless, they are microaggressions. Heterosexist language. This is where we are removing inclusivity and creating just one or the other options. So person being forced to choose between male or female when completing basic forms. So what's going on here, LGBT categories are not recognized, and that their partnerships are sometimes maybe invisible. We see this with married, non-married statements or questions. And we also see this too with examples such as a heterosexual man, perhaps having more female friends, and we're labeling him as gay simply because of who he chooses to hang out with. Criminality assumption. This is where, for example, for the sake of this presentation, a white person may clutch their purse or wallet when a Black or Latino person approaches, or a store owner following a customer of color around the store. What's happening here, a person of color is presumed to be more dangerous, criminal, or deviant based on his or her race. Furthermore, micro-invalidations. Again, these are often unconscious. Verbal comments, behaviors that exclude, negate, or nullify the psychological thoughts, feelings, or experiential reality of a person. This is where we take away one's experience. We approach it as a singular, we approach things as a singular experience and use it to generalize everything. And we just remove the person's experience altogether from the conversation or equation. Gaslighting. This is a buzzword that we've heard more recently in the media, but this term actually is not new. It actually comes from a play that was written back in the 30s where a husband is gaslighting his wife and having her feel like she's insane in some of the accusations that she makes towards him. But what's happening here is making a person question their sanity, perception of reality, or memories. Methods of gaslighting include countering, withholding, trivializing, denial, diverting, and stereotyping. So what do we do when this occurs? Because they will occur. And oftentimes they can be presented innocently. We must separate the person from the behavior. So remove the shame and blame from it all. Rather than saying you're a racist, try saying something like that could be perceived as a racist remark. Ask questions about the behavior using phrases like how or what made you rather than why. This can avoid making the person become defensive, and this allows for dialogue, conversation to move the needle forward. Use I statements or refer to the action indirectly to describe the scenario. When this happened, I felt this response. This is how I felt. Delivery is really important, more than the words that are actually conveyed. So please note your tone of voice, your body language when responding, and always remember your intention and goal for your outcome. So thinking about this all helps with creating that safe space to have that important conversation. So allyship. If you introduce the term allyship to us, but what does it really look like? It is taking action, advocating. Don't be a bystander. Lend your voice, lend your resources, lend your impact, lend your influence. Share growth opportunities, be inclusive, not selective. Know that venting is not a personal attack. Create space for your learners, your students, to show up as their authentic selves. Recognize systematic inequalities and the impact of microaggressions in the workplace or the learning setting. Believe underrepresented people's experience. No one should feel that they're on trial to prove their human experience. Mentorship, sponsorship, know the difference. Mentorship is somewhat like coaching, being able to see that person, having more of that intimate relationship and helping that person, that student develop. That sponsorship piece is where you're able to speak highly of that person when they may not even know it. When you are at the boardroom and you're able to elevate or open and provide access to your student or learner. Listen, support, self-reflect, and if needed, change. So going back to our knowledge assessment question, as many had put into our chat, E is the correct answer. We want to include all of these options in promoting a more equitable and inclusive learning environment.
So we are going to move to the section on gender identity. So which of the following statements regarding biological sex and gender identity is or are true? Is it cisgender describes a person whose gender identity matches their sex assigned at birth? Transgender describes a person whose gender identity does not align with the sex assigned at birth? Or are non-binary people describes a person who does not identify strictly as a man or a woman? Is it A, B, C, or is it A and C, or A, B, and C? Okay, I see some E's. All right, so let's dive into it. So here's our first scenario. You have a learner, Robert Engel, assigned to your rotation. She states that her name is R. Susan Engel. Her pronouns are she, her, and hers. So what is the difference between gender identity and biological sex? What are pronouns? Why are they important? And how would you go about applying pronouns in your everyday life? So biological sex is assigned at birth based on physical anatomy of being a boy or a girl. So you have a male anatomy, you're a boy, you have a female anatomy, you're a girl. Your gender identity is defined as a person's conception of themselves as either being a male, female, both, or neither. So a cisgender person is when the gender identity that was assigned at birth actually matches the way the person feels about themselves. So this is the majority of the people in the world. Then we have transgender people where their gender identity does not align with the sex assigned at birth. So they may have been born a male anatomically, but they feel like a female or the other way around. Non-binary people are individuals who don't identify strictly as a man or a woman. So it is so very important that when somebody tells you what their gender is, you refer to them as that gender that they tell you that they have, okay? It is not respectful for somebody to tell you that their pronouns are she, her, and hers, and you keep referring to them as a he or him because of their physical appearance, okay? So we have 3 traditional pronouns. There are so many others, but we're just gonna focus on these 3. So he, him is a masculine designation, she, her is feminine, and they, them is neutral. So very important that you are respectful of people. It is so validating for somebody to be recognized and authentically show up to work or to class or to school as themselves, okay? And also, as long as you're using these pronouns, it removes assumptions. You don't need to guess. So how do you make sure you set the tone for doing this? Introduce yourself at meetings. Make sure that your signature line has your pronouns. Your Zoom lines have your pronouns. It should be voluntary. You should not force people to tell you what their pronouns are, okay? And for some people, and you know, I've read quite a few schools have policies where until you say what they are, they're going to refer to you as their, them, theirs, right? So that is a way for them not to guess. So that not to guess. See, Bruce says sex is not assigned at birth, correct? So make this voluntary for people. All right. Gender X is the law in United States. I'm not in the United States, but in Maryland. Maryland in 2019, October 2019, actually passed this law where you have 3 boxes to check at any time, either female, X, or male, okay? So this is very, very important. You do not need anybody to give you any permission to do that. You can change your driver's license without having to bring any documentation. You simply have to say that this is your gender and you'll be recognized as such. This has quite a few implications. And health insurance has implications in medical records and healthcare delivery processes. So for us, you know, we have electronic medical records, we have EPIC. So there is a sexual orientation and gender identity a program within EPIC, right? So our IT people assures us that this is available. I've seen it. But what the concerns are is the clinical utilization of it for our medical records. So know that this is coming. Know that this is coming. And what is going to require is a lot of education in the front end, and the schools need to be prepared as well to provide that education to students on what that will mean. So one example that I can give to you is, say, the crowding clearance calculation. Any algorithms or calculators that have gender in it, which gender are you going to use? Okay? So which gender is going to be used there, especially if there's a disconnect between the medical record, right, and what the health insurance document or any other documentation that the patient comes up with. So we have some work to do within that area. But this slide is here just to let you know that we are here already and that we need to be preparing for it as we educate our learners. So the answer to this question is A, B, and C. Cisgender would describe somebody whose gender identity matches the sex assigned at birth. And then the transgender describes a person whose gender identity does not align with the sex assigned at birth. And I'm gonna have to get some more from Bruce on this. All right, so you are assigned an international learner from Africa whose name is Ifeanyi Egbunike-Chukwuma. If you have noticed, that's me. I am Christian, I'm not a devout Muslim, and I arrived at rotation during Ramadan. So this is a slide here to kind of illustrate 2 things to you and how to create this inclusive environment. Let's talk about religion first, okay? So we have so many religions in the world. As you saw, as we started this meeting already, we have so many people that have different religions that they belong to and they practice. So if I had an a person that is Muslim coming to my rotation during Ramadan, and I have, there's some challenges here, right? You have to understand what that means for that particular student. How many times they need to pray? They may be fasting. There are some observances that they have that you may need to accommodate. So I always ask my students, you know, especially when they're coming in, some of them will be proactive about it and say, you know, I have to be doing this on this particular day or this particular day. I give them that opportunity and I make it possible for them. You can always make up time to worship the way that you want to worship. The other thing that I have to say is that most of us work in hospitals. I work in a hospital that has a chapel. My chapel has a cross in it. It is primarily for Christians, right? So is that place a welcoming environment for a Muslim or any other faith to come and worship? So as much as possible, how can we accommodate our environments for the different religions that we can encounter in our everyday life? Do you even know within your departments, within your school, within your classrooms, and as students are coming to your rotation, do you know what's important to them as it relates to their religious preferences? So I want to leave that because that's a deep, I'll have 1 hour conversations about that as we talk about inclusive environment, and we involve our chaplains in this conversation and discussions on how to be more accommodating. The next thing I want to talk about is the name. This is easy. This is a low hanging fruit. So I have this, you're going to call me what? So when you see my name, it can be intimidating for some people, right? So I started this campaign of Say My Name because of an incident that happened at work a few months back. We were having a meeting and one of the managers said, oh, she has 12 letters in her name. And so we just refer to her as Ann Z. Okay, so they did not even bother to tell us this person's name. And I know for a fact that this person did not give them permission to just call them Z, right? So now I wanted to break down my name for you because I just want you to understand for some of us how important names are. So my name is Ifeanyi and everybody calls me Ife. And my Ife is spelled with an I-F-Y. My full name is Ifeanyi. My maiden name is Egbunike and my married name is Chukwuma. A mouthful, right? You know, but guess what? Sandeep did a wonderful job of saying that name. Ifeanyi means nothing is impossible. Chukwu means God. So Ifeanyi Chukwu is nothing is impossible for God. So my name is a prayer. So my parents gave me this name. So every time you say Ife, what I hear is Ifeanyi Chukwu. I hear nothing is impossible for God. And that is what I am taking into on myself. And that's what's important to them. So my maiden name is Egbunike, which means may we be spared from violent death. So this is an homage to my ancestors who, for whatever reason, went through so much that they took up this name. So I feel that it's important that I maintain this name. I even maintained it when I got married. For some of us that are Africans, you're supposed to lose your maiden name. I did not. So my marriage name is Chukwuma, which means God knows. God knows. So every time you say my name and you say it correctly, even if you say Ife, is important. So let me tell you what happens. It's not that you mispronounce the name. That's okay. It's okay for the mispronunciation because you are attempting to say the name of the person, but at least ask, try and learn and respect that name. Not just my name, the name of anybody that you encountered. And this doesn't have to be with some of us that have these exotic sounding names, but there are other things. There are people that are named James Michael III, right? This is important to them. That's their family wants to maintain that family name. And there are also people who were named after their great aunts, their grandfather, their grandmother, something. So all of those things are important. So when somebody tells you their names, try to learn it and try to learn how to say it. Okay, so I have a co-worker called Farah. Everybody calls her Farah. So, and it's spelled exactly the same way. So the very day that she tells us she's actually pronounced Farah, we all started calling her Farah. So it's important that you know how people's names are said. So please ask, try, learn and respect. What we don't tend to like is you asking, does your name have a meaning? That's not always, unless I tell you that it's not really necessary for you to ask. And I don't get upset. Some people think that it's upsetting. For me, it's not. One more thing that I have to say about names is that if I have my name on a signature line and it's spelled IFY, it is not respectful for you to write me and call me EFFIE, right? Or IFFIE or anything else, because I already told you that the spelling of my name is IFY. It's just the respect that you need to try to apply. And you do that for everybody, regardless of whether they're a student, a co-worker, or your boss. All right, so you see, I'm passionate about names. So which of the following are ways to create an inclusive environment? Setting the tone by disclosing your pronouns, direct your team on the importance of protecting the students' privacy, participate in your department, organization's diversity and inclusion initiatives, examine and address your unconscious bias. I think everybody is, we probably didn't need to do this talk. Everybody knows the answer. Okay,
Next time we'll do K-type questions.
Yes. Okay, now, okay, one more thing. Which of the following are potential barriers to achieving a diverse and inclusive learning environment? Inadequate knowledge and understanding regarding the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion, failure to model and promote inclusive language and behavior, assigning expertise to a person based on their color, gender, or sexual orientation. A and B are correct, A, B, and C are correct. Okay, let's start. Time-wise, we're moving on, watching the time.
Okay, awesome. Some strategies for creating a diverse, equitable, inclusive environment. Start with empowerment. Start with empowering your learners, accommodating their different learning styles and abilities. Don't judge them for their experiences. Don't judge them based on things outside of their control. Support and encourage input and decision-making process. On the other side, collaborate, invite and explore diverse stakeholders. Like we said, it starts with you, but then the next step is to perhaps include your boss, include some other preceptors, and create that more inclusive environment. Review your selection, decision-making process, and selection tools for unintentional biases. Examine the potential for and implication of past and or current structural and institutional discriminatory practices. It's okay to realize that there's some practices in place that actually don't present a more fair, equitable opportunity. Make those changes and embrace those changes. Respect, lead with cultural intelligence. So what's happening here? Checking yourself, strive for fairness, orient the learner well, be intentional about eliminating bias. Are you modeling inclusive language? Are you saying you guys? Are we making blanket statements that just generalize and perpetuate stereotypes? Are we taking the extra effort to learn our learners' colleagues' name, their experiences? Are we creating spaces that are conducive to learning and conducive to transparency? Don't assign expertise based on gender identity or race. Don't make assumptions regarding your learners' or colleagues' background, experiences, or age. This comes up a lot with students that have shared with me based on their age. They've had preceptors tell them, go to retail. It might be too late in the game for you to pursue a residency. On the flip side, some of our students that may come from HBCUs or different environments, different socioeconomic statuses, they're also being encouraged, go the retail route. And some of our other students are told, you would be a great fit for residency. What is that based on? Those experiences are shared among students, and some feel disempowered to even consider a residency. Be very intentional in those discussions. The impact can last a lifetime. Accommodate different learning styles and abilities. As if he shared, it wouldn't be an issue to create space for those who may have a different religion or a different accommodation needed to successfully complete your rotation. Be respectful of cultural and religious observances. Again, to that point about creating space. As a preceptor and or faculty member, please understand your responsibility is to create a climate that encourages learning and to create opportunities for learning as well.
So we've talked about creating this inclusive learning environment, and for the interest of time, we really have talked about safe spaces, making sure that you're setting the tone and directing your team members to protect the privacy of your learners and using your pronouns appropriately and learning how to say people's name. Things like assigning your student to the right locker room, if you have locker rooms, is important. And also make sure that if there's any gender identity-based harassment or microaggression that is addressed immediately, do not allow this to fester. And respect and support the learner at all times. So where can you start? Start with you. Always start with you. Take a look and see, people around you in your department, in your work area, especially if you're a leader. What are their races, gender, age? Build a profile of your group, of your department. I have a profile of my department. Do you think you have a safe, inclusive department? Do you really feel that are people safe to talk? I make this example of the fact that when I came to Maryland, I'm looking for a job. I actually was interviewing in a hospital where people were just walking. I mean, there was the vibe in that pharmacy was very palpable, and everybody was in their space. There's like people are not even looking right or left. And I just felt, okay, this is not a good place for me. I'm not going to be a good fit for this because, I do want to have some more interaction in my work, in my workplace. Are you modeling an inclusive language? And then how do you know if your institution is diverse and inclusive? Do you have a DEI statement in your core values? So everybody just take a look at the School of Pharmacy, any place that you work. Do you have anything about diversity, equity, and inclusion there? And if you do you actually have a top level C-suite leader, a CEO, president, VP level person that is designated as a diversity and inclusive, diversity, equity, and inclusion administrator or officer? Are you aware of any DEI activities that is going on within your work environment? If not, why don't you do some investigation and see if any exist? Because if they don't exist, then you are not working in a very diverse and inclusive environment. A variety of holidays recognized. We all know the usual holidays like Christmas and so on. But do you have, the one was just this past weekend, right? Do you know what that was? For the people that, enjoy my Indian friends, it was great. Did you know what the celebration was? Okay, do you know all of the other celebrations that people have other than Christmas? Or are your non-Christian colleagues the people that are there for you to cover Christmas holidays for you so you can go celebrate? So those are things that you need to know. And do you have safe spaces? What about your places of worship? Do you have gender neutral bathrooms? We just built a tower at my campus and it was just beautiful, the amount of work that we did to create the signage for our gender neutral bathroom. It was beautiful. What about lactation rooms for our new mothers? Do you know if there's a lactation room in your hospital, your place of work? And if there's one, how were you told about it? And when you get there, is there a refrigerator? How do you know that your hard work is going to be protected, right, for your baby? Okay, do we have accommodation for abilities? So the answer to this question is all of the above, and I just want to move a little bit faster because of time. And this next question is some of the barriers that we can potentially see: inadequate knowledge and understanding regarding the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion, failure to model and promote inclusive language and behavior, assigning experience to a person based on their color, gender, or sexual orientation. These are all potential ways that we can place barriers in front of having an inclusive learning environment. All of this is correct. So as we close out today, I just want all of our preceptors to really try to be empathetic about our students. I know most of us enjoy precepting students and we love to precept students, right? And first, we need to really learn about our own implicit biases so we can remove these barriers. We need to address and recognize our internal biases that we have that may not be so obvious, right? And so you do have that student of color, you don't know how your implicit biases, unconscious biases are actually affecting the way that you interact with your students. Learn about them. It does not make you a bad person, right? So Maya Angelou says, when you know better, you do better. So once you know that something exists, you start working really hard towards trying to change that. I personally did some of the bias assessment on myself. It's online. Harvard has a pretty good one. And I found out I was biased against a whole lot of people. And when I'm trying to hire people, I've noticed that I have some significant biases, right? And I shared the stories about a story about one of my colleagues that I almost did not hire. Even though she was a perfect candidate, I almost did not hire this person because she had piercings and she had tattoos. Something that I did not know were some kind of barriers for me. And I almost didn't hire her because my interview process requires that 3 or 4 people interview a person. While I was voting against them, everybody was looking at me like I was crazy. She's the best candidate. They are the best candidate, and we ended up hiring this person, and it was a wonderful, wonderful choice that was made. So please look at yourself and know. Finally, a rotation occurs every 3 to 5 weeks, sometimes every week, sometimes every 4 weeks. But really, I have such respect for our students. I remember my student days, I know it's decades ago. It is a difficult thing to come to rotation every single 3 to 5 weeks. It's like going to a new job every single 3 to 5 weeks. You have a new boss, you have new colleagues, so you don't know what to expect, a new environment. So let's just be empathetic. Let's understand what those biases are, and let's try to build an inclusive environment for our students. Next.
Awesome. So lastly, I just wanted to leave everyone with this slide again. This presentation, the intent of this presentation was to create a space for you to consider a different option. We all have implicit biases. We all have biases in general. That's what makes us human. But I did find this quote very prolific and profound in describing the beauty of being human. So like a string of beads, it is our unique differences and intricacies that make us so appealing and attractive. We would not be as beautiful if we were all the same. It's the contrast and asymmetry that makes us worthwhile, shared by Lindsay Lunsford. So let's just strive to create relationships with our students so we can establish pathways that elevate diversity, equity, and inclusion. Again, thank you for having us. Thank you for this opportunity, and we open the floor to any questions, comments, etc.
We do apologize for being late, but I do want to there was a comment that was placed that sex is not assigned at birth. Sex is really not assigned at birth, sex is recorded at birth. So that is something that we need to adjust. You know, we're so used to saying assigned. So if that's not what you meant, whoever wrote that, please go ahead and clarify, but I just wanted to make sure that everybody's there. We apologize for running so late, but apologies. We usually do this in 90 minutes and we try to get it to an hour. Do we have time for questions or comments?